All right, it is Thursday, July 21st, 2022, and I'm Steven Sersky. Folks, thanks for joining me. This here is my podcast, and today I have another guest with me, and it is Rachel Weiss. She is Rachel Weiss. Oh, goodness. Rachel Weiss. She is co-host of the Date Night China podcast based here in Beijing, China. And today we have some time to talk about our own experiences in podcasting and living in China as expats. Her podcast is going on season 3 right now, and it's where she talks to not just expats, but also Chinese people and their experiences being single and being married and partnered up and everything here in Beijing, in Shanghai, throughout the country. And it's very interesting to hear some of the different voices that are around there, especially given that there are so many expats leaving the country as of late. She also has her own YouTube channel. She's a vlogger. You can find that on YouTube, which is Rachel Meets China. That's how I actually first met her. So I first encountered her works was through her travel vlog. And today we talk a lot about what it's like to run your own podcast, some of the things that can, the great things and the bad things, and then also what it's like to live as an expat here in China at this time, and what are some of the things that we see are going to happen over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years sort of thing. It's a good conversation. We did have a few tech failures, so you might hear some clips and stuff like that. It might drop out, but it is altogether unedited, full-length interview with Rachel Weiss. All right, folks, this is episode 31 of my podcast with Rachel Weiss.
Hello.
How's it going? Welcome.
Good. Nice to meet you.
Nice
Can
to
you hear
meet you
me?
too. Yes, I can hear you. Can you? Everything's okay?
Awesome.
Audio and video.
Everything's everything's okay.
Okay.
Which is always an amazing
What kind of
surprise.
headphones are you using?
Actually, these are Nathan's, so this is what he uses for our podcasting and stuff. And I was
Right.
like, they seem to be pretty good, and they've got a good mic. So I don't
Okay.
actually know what kind they are.
All right.
Yeah,
That's because they're very prominent. That's
they're huge.
they
That's the
look
thing.
like studio headphones, so I'm guessing that that's what
Yeah,
they are basically.
yeah.
Um,
I was putting them on, and I was like, oh God, they're giant. But it's like, well,
it's the
we're
new style these days. People they are going for the big cans on the head for the headphones
It's
now.
the
It's like
new thing. It's the Princess Leia kind of look, coming back.
I like to use these ones because I have to use headphones because I don't know about your place, but I get like doors slamming and everything, so it's a lot quieter and a lot easier to
Yeah,
focus when I'm
yes,
plugged in. But
I'm the same.
yeah, I tried using Power Beats to record and headphones and everything, but they just weren't as good quality. So you know what, I'm
Yeah,
just gonna have.
and quality is important. So you know what? We'll do it
All right, well, so today we have Rachel Weiss, Weiss, Rachel
twice.
Weiss.
Yes.
With me today. Thank you very much for joining me. She's a fellow expat here in Beijing and prolific YouTuber and podcaster, I guess. And you've been here for what, 8 or 9 years or 6 years? How many? I can't even remember.
7 years, but
7 years.
starting the 8th this summer. So it's
Right.
crazy. Yeah.
Okay. And so you've been keeping busy doing all sorts of things. I mean, it looks like you're pretty immersed in the Chinese culture. You've been able to travel quite a bit. So I actually encountered you on several social media channels, and then it was through WeChat, the Date Night China podcast, WeChat. You guys have a publication like through the WeChat subscriptions or whatever. And I was like, Rachel Weiss, that's her, that's that girl. And so that's how I found you. Welcome.
That's
Thanks for
so
taking the time.
cool. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to chat with you today. And it is so cool to see how many platforms that people are on and connect across. Like, there's so many people that are the same as well that you're like, oh, finally, we're connected on WeChat, but we know each other through all of these other things, Twitter, Instagram, all of that.
You have, I mean, you have several social media accounts. What would you say is like your main one that you use? Like, is it YouTube or is it Instagram or what else?
Actually, it's Instagram. I think
Yeah.
it's just easier because it's more of a daily thing, whereas YouTube sometimes just takes so long for the editing and to get into the flow of doing longer videos. Whereas Instagram now it's a bit easier with the reels or shorter videos or daily updates. So mainly I use Instagram. I don't use YouTube as much anymore. I'm not as active there because I just spend so much of my time doing everything for my Instagram or all the date night China stuff. That takes up a lot of time now. So I kind of have shifted my focus from YouTube, but I used to be more active there.
Right. So why don't you give us a rundown of what you're doing here in China? Like I've touched on some of it, but I might be missing something here. So what is it that brings you here? What keeps you here? What keeps you busy in your day-to-day life?
Ooh, so many things. So yeah, when I first came to China, I was a teacher, but I was just growing my own Instagram, my own YouTube, like you just mentioned, and my website. So I wrote about traveling in China, sharing my experiences in China. First, it was just a way to keep up with friends and family, show them what am I doing in China. I lived in a small city in Hunan province, so I was there for 2 years. Then I moved to Guangzhou, and then I moved to Beijing. So it was really a fun way to interact, show people what I was doing, and then eventually I started growing it and kind of thinking, oh, how can I actually use this kind of in a business way? I was collaborating with like tour groups and travel brands, things like that, to show more of China to the West. I think there's always that misconception. There's all these stereotypes that I think people often have, as we all know. And it was just a really fun way to also just show my travels and like, where am I going and what am I doing? So I was really focused on my own platform, Rachel Weiss China, for many, many years. And that's something that I still do now. But like I've mentioned, my shift has kind of focused to, my focus has kind of shifted now to Date Night China. And so Date Night China is a media platform that Nathan and I, my co-host, started in 2019, pre-pandemic time. Never knew what was going to be coming next. But I had been in Beijing for a while and started finding some communities, people to hang out in. And Nathan and I actually met at this bar called Cafe de la Poste. Were you here in Beijing? Okay. That classic old French bar in Beijing. But we were just friends and we had a great time chatting. We ran into each other a few other times around Beijing, small social expat scene. And we were just talking about dating and meeting people and the communities you find here. And then one of our friends kind of drunkenly stumbled over and was like, I have this love triangle going on. Let's talk about it. And we were just joking and we were drinking as well. Like, this would be a great podcast idea. Let's talk about these stories. And then we went to KTV and we're like, let's forget about it. But the next morning I was like, no, I think that would actually be pretty cool. So then we
So
started doing that.
you're saying that alcohol helped you start your podcast?
Crazy, right? Who knew? It
I
does.
mean, I wonder
Especially
how many podcasts have started like that actually. In terms of, I have this idea for a podcast, and then it's like, okay, next
yes,
thing you know, you have 6 beers and you have microphones everywhere. But
yes.
that's pretty interesting though that you like it was you didn't record that first conversation, did you?
No, sadly, no.
Okay.
Wish that'd been great. Oh,
The
good for the record.
I I guess because I started when did I start? 2020. I started podcasting, and I was very reluctant. I was like, I don't want to do this. It was like because it was one more thing that I was adding on to some of the other things. Like I was trying to blog a lot more, write a little bit more about my travels and stuff like that. But it was just like podcasting. It's like now it's audio, but then I see people doing video and audio. I'm like, this just I know the rabbit hole that you can go down. But I
Totally.
remember there was one girl who was just like, yeah, you sound like my colleague who's like always talking about starting a podcast and he never did. I'm like, okay, I got to start it. Then it's like I've just been called out.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not that guy.
Hey, I'm
Okay, I
not,
guess I'll
I
do
hope you're
it.
not talking about me in a code word or something. But so you guys have been going on with the Date Night China podcast, which I mean, I is actually a very relevant and useful podcast and website as well, because you guys have a lot of articles that you publish. What has been your focus a lot with that podcast?
Um, I think it's definitely shifted and changed as we've done it further. I mean, because in the beginning when we started it, we were single. Nathan and I were single. We were dating. We were bringing and focusing more on kind of the single dating experiences, and it was a bit more expat centric as well. I think that's what we were really interested in. What has been like for expats dating here? But then we were like, no, we're in China. Let's expand, have Chinese voices, international voices from all over. And then even further than that, Nathan and I started dating like 5 months into the podcast. So yeah, we
Aw.
were like, well, we can't just talk about our relationship or tell stories about dating. People are obviously going to know like that's a story about Nathan. That's a story about Rachel. That would get kind of boring. And we were interested in like having a relationship podcast. Like I still want to talk to different people about their experiences. I want to hear what they're doing. And it's not just like singles dating either. We've really tried to focus more on intercultural couples, intercultural relationships, and all kinds of things with, even yesterday we recorded 2 podcast episodes. One was a polyamorous couple and one was a guy in the queer community of Beijing. So we've really tried to diversify the focus because it's just such a giant group of people here from all different backgrounds and experiences.
You have
Yeah.
you have an eclectic mix. It's actually kind of refreshing to see that you're able to pull from so many different sources and talk about it. Is there any other podcast like it in China that you've come across? That I don't know if there is. Yeah, I would imagine that Shanghai would have something, just because that's what Shanghai people do.
Yeah. Yeah, we've definitely done a lot of like research and checking what's out there. And also like I'm just curious as well. I listen to other China podcasts and it seems like they're kind of either focused more like Sinica podcast. It's really great, but it's kind of more from the politics, geopolitical, economic kind of point of view. And then you have other really good ones. There's one called Middle Earth podcast where it interviews people in all kinds of sectors and fields and industries. And I guess we're trying to we're trying to just keep the more social and interesting personal stories, human connections.
Yeah.
So if there's something else like that, I'd love to hear it because I'd love to know what else is out there, what other stories are being told. But I think we've also tried to elevate a little bit. We used to be really casual with it, and it was the drinking. We'd have bottles of wine with the guests, and it was so fun though. But I think we also realized we both work in media, and we wanted to keep it a little bit more professional, not totally formal, but we were like, okay, let's elevate, let's get microphones, let's take this a bit more seriously, and still have fun with it, but tell these kind of personal stories from people.
Yeah, I've stopped drinking during podcast recordings. I have found I actually have a couple podcasts. There's another a daily podcast I do. That one can happen
Oh
after a few
wow.
beers, but I try not to anymore because I have
You have like
found
a limit now? Two
what
beers, that's it.
before 6 p.m. Yes, but I have found that in terms of quality, not just like my thinking, but then also my voice. I don't know about how you and your partner Nathan deal with the smacking, but I have found that if I drink, that happens so much more, and it drives me crazy when I'm listening back to some of my podcasts, going, you can't. And I think that to people are hearing that in their ears. I go, because I'm very sensitive to that as well. But yeah, I had to stop drinking. I don't drink during podcasts anymore. So having this during the day, 11 o'clock, great, awesome.
I know now I'm like just on coffee, so just coffee is like much better than the alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have a different format to your podcast. You're in season 3. So
Yes.
what's your setup? How do you run your podcast scheduling?
Yeah, so we try to stay consistent with a weekly podcast, and of course we sometimes do a backlog, try to record a few, 2 in a week, 3 in a week, to try to get ahead or planning wise. It's hard though, like because also we have life going on as well, and with our own work jobs, with our own extra projects and other things that we do, and we both know like in next month, at the end of next month, we both might be traveling. And so
Oh,
we know, oh gosh, that's going to take some time away from our scheduling and for our planning. And we also really like to have our guests in person. If we sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 people on for like a dialogue roundtable kind of discussion. But we also know, okay, we'll do Zoom as well for those not in Beijing. You kind of have to be flexible depending on what we've got lined up. And it's changed as well. We used to kind of segment the show a bit and try to like break it down into different parts or do like a fun speed dating question round just to get to know the guests really fast or kind of games at the end. We've really done a lot with the formatting and tweaking it. And now we kind of just keep it as one long free flow conversation, minimal editing. And it's really just more about the guests and the stories that they get.
minimal editing is this podcast is all unedited. I can't. It was one of my fears about starting a podcast was like I do not want to sit there editing because I heard like I guess prior to like Joe Rogan becoming super famous, it was like people would sit down and edit their podcasts and almost change. It was like a news anchor basically changing the story. But I mean, yeah, unediting.
Yeah.
It's just publish
Yeah.
it. It's just
Yes.
talk, record, publish in
Done.
that order.
Put it out there. Put it out there. And that's what we like to tell our guests as well. We're like, okay, there is going to be minimal editing. Of course, if you're uncomfortable with something later, but we really love it when it's just easy because it can take so much time and you're already planning the next things and you're in get, pre-production and planning. And oh my gosh, it could eat up like your whole week if you're trying to edit so much. So I totally understand that. How
Yeah.
does your planning go for podcasts
Uh,
and for that kind of stuff?
this podcast is whenever I have time and whenever I can find someone who also has time, because this one is the extended conversation format where I just kind of I talk to fellow expats, I talk to friends and people that I've known for years, and it's just free form, free going. I do run it through Logic Pro afterwards and fix it up because I have a fan going to keep me cool right now. You might have air conditioning. I don't. I do, but it's a horrible
Oh,
energy sucker of an air conditioner.
bless your heart.
Yeah, so I just have one
Wow.
fan, so I try to kill the background noise and stuff like that, and that's the only thing I
Yeah.
do. Other than that, I mean, very minimal editing, planning. Usually it's whoever I meet and people I see that are doing stuff and producing stuff. And typically, if they have a website, they're pretty open to talking and stuff like that. So, um,
Yeah.
but then I do have another podcast, which is just me using my phone, and it's like 20 minutes yik yak today's what I did today in Beijing, and then
Wow.
that's it.
Wow. How long have you been doing that?
That's been a year, and
A year.
that one went from 1 minute because it was meant to be one of these like just very quick rundowns, and then it grew. I kept on talking about I don't know dumb shit or whatever about life, and I talk a lot about working out, my struggles learning Chinese, and what's going on in Beijing. And I do that for a couple of reasons because one, I want a record of the times as they are, and I know that people overseas listen to it, and I want them to have sort of that on the ground um, experience, that daily sort of exposure to what's going on in Beijing. But that's been going on for a year, so and I try to cap it at 20
Wow.
minutes per day, Monday to Friday, and that's it. But this big
Wow.
podcast is, I mean, it's been, I think the last episode I recorded was in February or March, I can't remember, but I treat it more like a live
Wow.
show because it's just easier that way, I find. So,
Yes,
but
totally. That's cool
with
though. You have kind of two different dynamics. Like that's really nice.
I don't know, like, because your podcast, it seemed like you actually had a goal. You had an actual idea that was useful and could be would have an audience right away. Mine was a little bit more, eh, all over the place. But I wanted to try different things. That was
Yeah.
my big
Sometimes
thing.
those are the best ones too, though, because you're just excited to do something and then it's just, it's fun. And that's what's really cool. And those tend to find audiences as well. They're just like, what's this guy doing in China?
What's he talking about now? Um,
Yeah, what's this?
Do you guys ever? Because I know that with YouTube, it can be doing video. I was thinking about going more into live video. So it's like you're recording the podcast and recording live video at the same time.
Mm,
Have you guys thought about moving that way? Because I know with your travel stuff, that seemed like it was all
yeah,
very nice and polished and edited and stuff like that. But that stuff takes time to
yeah,
make.
yeah. I think that's the difficult thing is like I know from YouTube, uh, we both do editing and video. Like my partner Nathan, uh, sorry, my WeChat keeps dinging. Can you hear that?
No.
Oh, great. Okay, I was like, um, so yeah, so we both do video and media. That's kind of what we do full time. So we know the kind of time it takes to do all of that. And Nathan is even more serious about video and editing. He does all the tech stuff actually. So I don't really do that side of it for the podcast because he's got a 10 years film experience back home in the UK before coming to China. And so we kind of did a lot of thinking before this season of Date Night China because before we had just been doing audio. We hadn't started doing any videos, but that was like my big goal. I was like, I want to do video interviews with people because you see channels, like Asian Boss or Vice, kind of people on the ground, Even here, there's a channel called Why China, and they're just doing street interviews in San Latine downtown. And I love the people face-to-face interaction. I love that you can kind of see their expressions and hear them talking about it. It just kind of adds even more. But we really were debating, like, should we film every podcast episode like we were talking about before? It would take so much time and effort to edit and to go through and to upload. Like, it would be so much. So then we decided, well, let's do video, but let's make it a little bit more succinct and bite-sized pieces. Let's get people in. We have people over to our place, and we have a green screen that we set up. So Nathan kind of takes care of all of that, and we just ask them, one person might answer 20 different questions about life in China, dating. We really customize it depending on their personal experiences, if they're married, if they're, whatnot. And then we'll kind of cut each of those answers up and combine them with other people talking about that same question, kind of in a cut style or Jubilee. I don't know. There's a lot of channels. I did a lot of research because, like, these are so many great stories in China, and it's hard to capture them all. And the podcast is great for long form discussion, but how can we kind of showcase a lot of more international and Chinese people into some videos? So we've kind of limited it that way, though, because we have to be really realistic about our time, our energy, our resources, because we've both been burned out before with Date Night China. Like, that happened last year because we were also running events at the same time. We were doing articles. We were trying to get guest collaborations, media collaborations, doing 1 or 2 events every month. It was exhausting, and it wasn't even our full-time job. So we've had to scale back a bit and be really realistic about what can we handle, what can we do, but still keep kind of our passion and excitement for it going.
What type of video format are you shooting in? Are you shooting 4K, 5K, 8K, or just 1080p? Do you know?
Ooh, I'd have to ask Nathan. I think it's 4K.
Okay.
I am really hands off with that side of it. For my own videos and stuff, I'll try to shoot in 4K.
Right.
But yeah.
The only reason I ask is it was a very rude awakening. I'd been doing film for a while, but I had never shot at 4K for extended periods of time, and I didn't realize there's a huge difference between how long it takes to export a 5-minute 4K clip and then a 2-hour conversation. I was like, okay, video's gonna wait. It's just gonna.
Yes, it's so much. Oh my God, it's so much to process and export, and it's a lot.
If you only have one computer, because I only have like my main device, it's like then you lock it up for exporting. It's like if you're trying to do anything else, like God forbid you want to. Thankfully, we have cell phones and other cheap devices, but yeah, video just sucks up everything. That's why I was kind of hoping just to do live video or just shoot it and put it up. I whatever sort of thing.
Yeah, live is nice as well because, like, once it's done, it's up, it's great. Yeah.
Do you ever have any concerns about what people might say? Because I know, like, when people hear that I'm in China, the immediate thought is like to start talking about politics. But I've always been able to sort of like get away from that. Has there been times when you're kind of like, okay, we're not going in that direction. We have to sort of stay on topic more about what this podcast is about?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, well, to be honestly, like, less so with Date Night China, more so with my own personal platform, which kind of makes sense because when you have somebody saying, I enjoyed traveling China, there's always going to be somebody saying, why, X, Y, and Z, this is why, this is, you do have the people who want to throw politics and have that discussion when that's not the focus, that's not your niche or your brand. I guess with Date Night China, it's really interesting. We don't have so many people coming at us and saying, why aren't you discussing the politics? Why aren't you discussing this? If anything, it's just interesting. We see people in our WeChat groups get into debates, not about politics, because that's not allowed in the groups, but they get into debates about all kinds of other things, as people are wont to do. So it's less so about politics, and it's more so like you really see how people from all these different cultural backgrounds are thinking differently about dating rules and etiquette and relationships. And they all have different humor levels. They all have different backgrounds for everything. And somebody might get offended super fast. Somebody else says, even though that person didn't mean it or they didn't say it the right way, maybe English isn't their first language. So we more so manage those kind of fiery interactions rather than the politics side for Date Night China.
I think when I first joined your WeChat group there,
you're in it.
One of the
Which
first
one are you in?
Number 5.
Okay. Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
is that, I mean, how many do you have? Because I was going date night channel
So,
5. I'm like, how many? So that means you have like 4 other groups that are topped out at 500, or what happens here?
well, so we only have 5 groups now. We were kind of growing for a while quickly. Uh,
Only
because
5.
only 5. That's a lot. Oh my gosh, being a group admin is really hard sometimes. But like we have one group specifically for Shanghai, and then we have 4 others that are kind of mixed with people from all over. Because as we were just growing, we are just like there's interests. We didn't have time to really categorize it or plan it out so much in advance. We would just create a new one as they filled up. Or if one was approaching like 475, 480, it just became easier when we had, 20 extra people interested rather than maxing out the group. Let's start a new one, get the word out about it. And it's also a great way, like we've done partnerships and media things. People like to, especially like if you're looking at the business side of it and marketing deals and things like that, we've had people who want to collaborate with us, depending on the number of WeChat account followers, depending on the number of groups you have, that kind of thing. So that was from the business side an interesting way to work with it. But we really just spend a lot of time creating group rules, moderating group chat. And I've also had to like learn to balance that with my own time though, because you could spend so much time getting sucked into that. So
Yeah.
try to take a step back. I don't know when did you join the group? Have you seen some
Two,
of the
3 months
interesting
ago?
chats?
2 or 3 months
Okay.
ago, I think. Yeah, there was, well, there's one guy who, I think it's in the date night channel. Yeah, it must be. He keeps on posting these videos that are very um, ethnically or racially obviously motivated to rile people up. And
Yeah.
it's gone both ways, like both from a Chinese source and from an English source. And I remember looking at this group going, why did I join this? I don't want to see this. Because, like, I mean, as I've gotten older, I've sort of stopped going out so much. I've become just an old man who sits at home all the time, which I'm fine with because here I work from home too nowadays. Uh, but it's like I don't mill about in those circles, and if I have any even a glancing conversation about that stuff, it just becomes like I don't. There's other things to talk about other than the obvious
Yes.
shit posting that's going on sometimes for a lot of times, right?
Yes.
So, and I
Yeah. A
like
hundred
it's like
percent
Twitter. Twitter is full of just trolls and everything, and it's kind of
nonsense.
almost disheartening in a way to see it that a lot of the
Yes.
social media stuff is being used that way, and to see it happen in WeChat, I'm like,
Yeah. You're
but
like not here too.
yeah, it happened also. There's another group I'm part of that they were looking for voice actors, and the the
Oh,
company was
I'm.
looking
I'm.
for. Are you in that group as well? The
Yes. Yes.
okay,
There was a big blow up that day, right? It was about
the
let's
stereotypical Spanish gangster or something like that, and I was
yes.
just like, okay,
Somebody
yep.
was. Yeah. They were like, why are they always the bad guys?
It's
Yeah.
true, but but because I've studied filmmaking, and it's like if you had a bad guy who wasn't a bad guy, how would you know he's a bad guy? Then it seems like they didn't know how they were writing the script, and it's like okay, that's just a bad movie. They didn't know what they're doing. But
Yeah.
I don't know. You gotta. I guess bad guys have a certain stereotype, and sometimes they come from some places, sometimes they come from other places. It depends on what you're doing with the
Yeah.
film. But yeah, so there was those two
Yeah.
blow-ups in both groups. I was just like,
Yes. And you were just like, I'm off. I'm getting out.
How has it been with your guests? Because, like with the podcast, you have so far it's 3 seasons. You're doing you're talking to lots of Chinese and foreigners. What has been sort of some of the things that you've seen and heard that are sort of important things with that your podcast has been able to teach you about people here in China, the expat community in China?
Oof. Yeah, so many things. I think, especially since we refocused from kind of a single stories and, fun dating stories. I mean, that was the base level is like showing, oh, wow, we all have these relatable experiences. You're not alone. Dating can be hard. Those were kind of the baseline things to go from and how to create a positive experience talking about those things. But since we've expanded to even more guests, I think it's a fun self education for me and for Nathan. Like we had one of our first episodes this season was with 3 Chinese girls that we had recently like become friends with. They had mutual friends in common, and I was just kind of throwing this idea around. I was like, oh, we hadn't really we haven't really dived deeper into some of these stories with Chinese women. What are they thinking? Especially they're mostly internationally women who have traveled abroad or they speak English, they work in international companies. Like, what do they feel about things? And I think it was just really cool to sit down and have three of them share their experiences and give space for their voices to talk about that kind of thing and not just from the usual like, well, I think Chinese women are like this, or I think it's very easily it's easy to generalize things. So that's what we see in the groups a lot. It's very easy to generalize based on one experience that you've had or what you hear from other people. So it's really cool to kind of challenge that and actually just hear, oh, we're all very individualistic as well. Like one girl was saying, like she's like, I don't really see why these stereotypes and everything. I judge a person not like basically from their country, but like how they are individually. Like and that was just a really cool thing to hear. We've done other episodes as well. Like recently, we did a big collaboration project for LGBTQ voices across China. We had people from all over China send audio clips and video clips in because we realized, we're kind of limited if we only do Beijing. There's so much more going on in China. And so that was a really cool project to get people from big cities, small cities all over to share their experiences and put those together in a more collaborative way. I think we also realized Nathan and I are two white people, straight white people, and it's hard to like you interject yourself and you're like, I can't tell your story and I shouldn't. So how can we create space for other stories and other perspectives and viewpoints that aren't us at all? And how do we do that without over interjecting ourselves into it, but by still, showing that we are happy to support. So I think that's something we've been thinking a lot about the season. Not always perfect, still trying and trying to do more. But it's been really cool. It's been really cool.
Has the response been the same from expats and from Chinese people to your podcast?
Yeah, actually, I think so. I mean, because it is an English podcast, it's mostly the international Chinese people who find it. Um, we've had a lot of good feedback, especially there's a few guys, Chinese guys, who are very consistent listening to our podcast. And it was really nice the feedback we got. We've recently interviewed some intercultural couples. And we were kind of focusing on Western women dating Asian men. And we were trying to focus on some of the stereotypes that Asian men receive. And I think they were kind of excited to see, oh, like, look at this kind of relationship. You kind of hear Western women don't date Asian men, or they don't this or that, or Asian men are like this in the media. And I think it was really cool to kind of show them, oh no, we're open to talking about these things. Not all stereotypes are like that. Not all women are like that. Um, so I think we've had a growing Chinese interest as well. And even in our events, I think honestly, we've had a lot of Chinese people really excited to uh, take part in international events because many of them were overseas and they're looking for more of an international connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty good response.
I wonder if there's any other podcast like this in Chinese that they would be able to find, only because it's like uh, the I remember when I have a girlfriend now, but I remember when I was dating, and some of the people you'd meet, you're just like, wow, it's like stepping back in time with some of the viewpoints that they had, and that was like a few years ago already. But in terms of even the guys, like you talk to some of the Chinese guys, and you're like, does that work? Like, what are you doing? Like, uh,
Yeah.
so it's good that you have like that you've created this resource for a lot of people, and not just singles, but for couples. One of the reasons I joined it was actually for date ideas, so that as
Yeah.
COVID was
Yeah.
ending, just what are other people doing, like other than sitting at home staring at each other? I mean, what else do other
Yes.
people do?
Yeah, totally. Like what else is out there doing date ideas and sharing those stories? Yeah, it's been really nice.
What's in terms of going forward for your podcast? What would you see happening? Because you're talking about doing videos on the street, but that sounds more like it's going to be like newsy type stuff more than dating. Or date night podcast. I mean, where's the direction for the podcast itself, you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, the podcast itself, I think we still have more guests and more ideas for what topics we want to cover. So we'll continue doing that on a weekly format. I think it is for the video that we have kind of bigger ideas because we have released, I think two, we have three ready to go. They were just getting subtitles ready because we want to do, English, Chinese subtitles. That takes a long time. So it's really just a process to prepare all of that stuff. And but we mostly have been doing the green screen videos. So we actually have a backlog now of like lots of interviews with people that we've already done.
Right.
And it's just finding the time with the scheduling to release those videos. I mean, realistically, I still have big hopes that it would be more consistent with how we can push out content. But sometimes, you know, you get into that marketing media mode, and like growing a channel is so hard. And I went through all of that with my own channels, and you just know what it takes to have to push it to get more people looking at it, and to get it out there, because it's one thing you work so hard on this content and planning and preparing these conversations, and you want people to see it, you want people to hear it and listen to it and talk about these things. So I don't know, I kind of weigh all of those things in my mind sometimes, but the most important thing is the conversations that you get to have with people, whether it's, you know, a lot of people that listen or, you know, just a few.
Was there a lot of spillover because your YouTube channel is your travels? Was there a lot of spillover into the Date Night China podcast?
um like for people, in terms of like people or like content
Yeah,
and topics.
people like were a lot of people that were following you on YouTube for that all of a sudden following you for Date Night China, or I mean, because you have, I can't remember how many videos you have for your YouTube channel, but it was like, oh my God, this lady is wow, that's a lot of content she's
What
got
is she
going on.
doing?
Well, and it's like, I mean, I don't know how some people are able to do this by creating that much stuff, but and especially when it's like actual content where you know, you're editing and stuff like that with titles, uh, which
Yeah.
means you have to export it, which means that you have a computer that can do that very quickly, which is great, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will be honest, a lot of my stuff, when I look back at my earlier videos, I didn't care so much about the highest quality production. I think some of my old videos aren't even in 1080. I think they're like whatever I got in the moment, and it was just me editing and doing little things. But it's so fun because it's really nice to look back on and for what it was. Um, but to be honest, I don't think there's been a little bit of crossover in terms of people, you know, following me there and finding Date Night China. But actually, it's not like huge, and it's okay actually, because I mean, I think, I guess some people are very specialized in thinking about China travel, and other people like, I think as well, they only think Date Night China is for singles. We've had this misconception a lot that we have to kind of push back against now that we've grown and expanded. So I think a lot of people think the name is, I'm not single, so it's not for me. So I have to think about how do we actually tell other stories and show people it's not just for singles. But I also just think a lot of people aren't as interested in the topics of dating and relationships from my channels, which is interesting. I kind of thought, like, for me, I'm like, yeah, tell me everything about dating and relationships. I always want to know that stuff. But I think some people are just kind of like, I'm just here for the travel content.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear dating stories.
Has there, speaking of, you know, people who are in relationships, they're like, oh, it's a singles podcast, not for me. Have you heard of any people like Chinese? I imagine like the Chinese wife or the Chinese husband getting in trouble for being part of this like this group. He's like, what are you in this date group for? You know, have
Yeah,
you heard of any of these stories, like these horror stories, or has it been pretty smooth
yeah.
sailing?
Yeah, there's this guy that I reconnected with at a friend's birthday party. We were out like at Great Leap one night, and he said, "Oh yeah, I was in your group like a year ago. It's so nice to see you again. You know, I think it's really cool what you guys do." Um, he's like, "But I had to leave the group because one day my girlfriend saw I was part of this group called Date Night China, and she was like, 'What is this?'" And he tried to explain, but I don't think it went so well. So he was like, I just left the group. And I was like, you know what? That was the smart move. Like, don't make it a big thing. Leave the group. It's fine. Like, don't worry about it. But that is something that's happened. Yeah.
It's like having Tinder on your phone for the language exchange, right?
Yes. Yes. I'm just here to meet friends. There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
There
goodness.
you are.
How is your Chinese? Are you able to do this podcast in Chinese at all, or is it going to be English? Okay, that look. Okay, all right.
English. No, I mean, gosh, that's the note that I think, I need, my Chinese should be better. So my Chinese like HSK 2 to 3.
Oh wow.
I
Okay.
used it a lot more when I was traveling, so it's not good enough for like conversations that to touch on deeper topics, you know. It wouldn't be enough to actually be conducted in the same to have the deeper level of things. Just wouldn't be able to do it and to have the fluency and consistency for an episode.
Yeah.
So no. Yeah. We've talked about having like branch off and having maybe a Chinese host, co-host or a guest host or something to kind of share more voices or share more stories in Chinese or something like that. But I think we've also thought like, you know what is our niche? Who is our audience? And what are we capable of doing right now? So it is in English. How is
Hmm.
yours?
Well, I just failed the HSK5 test this past weekend. I took it,
Wow.
but it was horrible, and I was warned. And yeah, no, it was horrible. It was terrible. I
Well,
opened up
good for
the.
you for attempting it.
Oh goodness. Yeah, I was sorely underprepared. I mean, I've been very complacent with my Chinese studies as of late. It's just so much. Like it's
Yep.
such an involved language. You have to read because from it's like reading emojis. You're reading every character. Oh, snap. Oh, dropped.
Didn't start my video. Okay.
There we go.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Sorry about that. I this is new. Like Zoom it used to give me more
Yeah.
time all the time. I guess that's maybe because the stock has fallen so much that
Oh,
they
maybe. Yeah,
need to
ours always cuts
smash
us
it.
off at 40 minutes. That's happened to us before too. And then you're like, oh, gotta restart.
Good,
Happens.
yeah. I didn't realize that was going to happen. I just did another interview a couple months ago, and it was fine. But I guess I don't. You probably know better than I do because you use this thing probably far more than I do. Do you have you thought about getting the pro version yet, or no? You still have the
No, yeah,
basic.
we still have the basic because we don't do Zoom often enough. Actually, like surprisingly for work and stuff, I haven't had to use it much, just for that one-off chance that we do interviews with somebody not in Beijing. Um, so we haven't. Maybe we should, but eh.
What do you use instead? You just do it in person, don't you?
Yeah, we mostly just do in person, and so that's never have to worry about that or disconnecting or anything.
Yeah. I was thinking of doing that sort of in-house thing, but it's like when I don't know people as well, and it's like my studio, it's my apartment, right? It's like to me, it's I don't know if I
Like
feel
this is
safe.
my space.
Yeah, and I'm also not sure if people would feel comfortable coming over, and like then I'd have to clean. I'm not. It's
Yeah, you're like, oh, nah.
no, and they don't make bed sheets big enough to cover up all the crap that I got lying all over the place. So, so.
Totally,
Uh,
totally fair.
but we were talking about the Chinese skills and how I just failed the HSK5 test.
Yeah.
I was warned prior to going that I mean, I was rough. I have actually in of a spur of a moment of inspiration. I've started my own language channel that was supposed to encourage me to use my Chinese because because of restricted travel um, opportunities, and I don't go out very much, so I don't talk to Chinese people very much. And when I do, it's usually the same conversation over and over again. I figured that one of the things I could do is create videos and just speak them in Chinese. And a couple of my colleagues have seen them, and they're like, "Dude, your tones suck. They're horrible. Um, we can understand what you're saying, but your tones like literally could be taken this way or that way." So that's one thing I do have to work on. Not just like
Wow.
the reading, but it's like the speaking as well. It's horrible, horrible, horrible.
But good on you for doing that and creating that, even to try and say, well, you know what, it's progress. I'm doing these videos now. I can keep working on it, see how far I go. And good job for attempting the HSK5. So will you try it again?
I have to. This is I have to. It's I the I took it because I needed to, first of all, kick myself out of complacency with my language studies. I want to see what my level is. And then I read in one blog post that uh, if you want to move your score up by 1 point, you have to spend 2 to 3 hours of study. I'm like, okay, so that gives me like a mathematical equation that I could follow. So if I get, I don't know, for example, like 40 points, out of 300 points, if I score like 170 or 150, so if I get 50%, then if I want to move up another 60 points, I'd have to spend like another hour,
Mm,
60 times what, 3 hours is 180 hours, right? Which is
yeah.
6 hours per day over however many 3 months or something like that. It's so you can start doing the math of
Wow.
how long you could
Yes.
spend contacting the language and in theory move yourself up. So my next ideal date for the test would be in October. That would give me enough
Wow.
time to sort of October, November doesn't. I'm not going to push myself. I was prior to taking this test, the one thing that I wasn't nervous, which was a flag to me, because if I'm not nervous, that means like something's not right. Number two was that I hadn't started the HSK6 books yet. And prior to taking the last test, I'd already gone to the next level before taking the test. So I knew that I maybe hadn't spent as much time as I should have in preparation. But this good push.
Ah,
Now I see
it's a
it.
good way
Yeah.
to see where you're at and where you can progress for sure. Now,
Yeah.
is your partner Chinese?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
we basically date because she speaks English.
Do
She,
you
I,
guys practice in Chinese very often?
she says things in Chinese, and then I sit there and go, wow, my Chinese is terrible. For all the study I spend, all the time I spend studying this language, why can't I understand what she's saying? But one reason is that she does have an accent. So like she speaks
Ah,
with,
where's she from?
she's from Inner Mongolia.
Oh, okay.
It's not a big accent. It's not like, a southern drawl compared to like London sort of thing. That's a huge difference. But the the way that the words that she uses are not always the words that are taught in the textbook. And
Right.
so there's a difference between like relationship Chinese and like standard test passing Chinese, which is what
Yes.
I'm studying. So,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah, you're like, this is not helpful to me for the test. All these
yeah.
slang, dialect words.
But
Ooh.
I mean, it's not so much I always understand 100% what she's saying, but if I have trouble explaining something in English, I am now able to at least paraphrase it in Chinese and explain a little bit more. So that,
Ooh.
at least that has gone up in the relationship. So I'm able to
Progress.
explain some things, which is helpful in some of these interracial relationships. I mean, you need
Yeah,
patience.
100%. How long have you guys been together?
Oh, 6 years, something like that. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Oh,
quite a while.
wow. You've been together quite a while then. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Um, COVID happened, and I did have a job where I was out of the city quite a bit. So it's like we would see each other once a week. So I think altogether, I don't know if I did the complete total number of days that we've seen each other. I might have sat down and figured it out at one time just for shits and giggles, but
I feel
it
like you like calculations.
well, it helps understand some things, but
Yeah.
I feel like that's the number that I shouldn't have at hand at either. It's like, oh well, we've only seen each other for 362 days total over 7 years, so technically it's a part that you're right. Yeah. But yeah, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. My big thing has been trying to get her to agree to move overseas, and she is a little bit because she's only
Mm,
lived in China. She's traveled, but she's only ever
wow.
lived in China before. So, and I'm just like, I don't know, let's go backpack the world or something,
Yeah. Are you kind of
something like that.
itching to get out of China soon?
I would also be looking for other jobs. I've been talking about going to the Middle East for quite a bit, but I mean, I see why she doesn't want to leave. I we haven't talked about your reasons for coming to China, but I mean, I never thought of China as being home, and given the residence permits and stuff like that, the sort of the hoops that you have to jump through to stay here over the long term, um, I don't know if it's a country that I can see myself staying in, not just because of me, but because of the red tape that's in front of it. So, but we'll
Yeah.
see. We're both gainfully employed here, so it's not a big issue right now. We're making money, we're keeping busy. As long as they don't, I mean, if they went to another lockdown, I mean, I don't know. Would that change our opinion?
Yeah.
Good question. I don't know.
Yeah. Those are the same questions we ask ourselves too, because we're like, well, we're okay now. Like you said, we got a job, we're busy, we've got projects we love doing here. What's going to be kind of our point to leave China? It's a big question mark right now. Not really sure.
Do you have an idea? You've been here for 7 years,
Mm,
which is the same
no,
as me, I
no
guess.
idea. Yeah. So wow. No, I think that's big. I don't know. It's really hard to say because yeah, we've had friends leave recently, big expat exodus. We've like been to so many goodbye parties the last few months. And it makes you wonder, like, oh, okay, so they're figuring out plans. Some of them know what they're doing next. Some of them don't. They just know they want to leave China. So it makes you think, like, should we know what we want to do next? Because we're so busy doing all the things that we do here, and we're not quite ready to leave yet. But we had
Yeah.
friends leave like after Shanghai lockdown, and you're like, whoa, well, that's a big thing that's gonna, kind of be a big sign, like, okay, it's time to leave China. So we're like, do we wait for that big kind of moment, or do you want to feel prepared and plan in advance, maybe leave before you're ready, but leave on a good note? I don't know. We think about it, but we don't have a clear answer.
I've never been good at making those plans perfect. It's always just been like a stumble. It's just okay. I don't. Have you seen the movie Ace
Yeah.
Ventura, Pet Detective?
Years ago, yeah.
Do you remember the part where he is in a stakeout? He's hiding out in a hippo costume, and he gets so hot he has to take off all
No,
his
I
clothes.
don't. Oh,
And he
geez.
gets the view is that on the camera on the scene you see him come out the rhinoceros's ass or something like that, and there's this Chinese family watching him, and it's like, oh, the rhinoceros is giving birth. That is how I feel my travel life is like I'm sort of in like a little bubble, and I just kind of am getting shit out the other side, and it's like people are taking pictures. Oh, look at that, that's kind of funny.
Look at that guy. That's the best analogy I've ever heard. That's really great.
I did read your article about the expat exodus, and I was just at another going away party
Ah,
yesterday, and I was thinking like it is one of these questions where you kind of wonder, and you're talking about how busy you are with all the things. You're very involved, not just like in Chinese culture and stuff, but with your own work, and it's one reason I find like I don't want to uproot myself from this and leave, because then I'd have to figure out, well, do I want to keep on doing all this stuff, and how do I keep on doing it over there? I mean, at what point would you think that you have done all you could do in a country? Because let's face it, you did leave your homeland, which at one point you're like, okay, I'm done here. What would it take for China, do you think?
yeah, I've wondered that as well because I always thought, oh, once I'm here for 10 years, it's time to go. Like, because I guess like when I was like, I guess on year 4 or 5 when I moved to Beijing, and I met those expats who had been here for 10 years. And back then you're kind of like, 10 years is a long time. You had to get a little bit judgy, like, well, I'm not gonna be that expat, but actually I could see that now. Um, because I guess of how you find opportunities in China. And that's always been one of the best things about China, right? And unless all of that changes and gets, you know, worse with COVID and restrictions and stuff, like it kind of has, things are a little bit more limited now. But I still have been able to find so many opportunities here that maybe I will be the 10-year expat. And I've also have to learn like I can be okay with that just because it's a number. It doesn't mean it's just an arbitrary number. It doesn't mean anything. It depends on where my trajectory is. If I'm happy with where I'm investing my time, my projects, my passions, am I still excited to be here? Then that's okay. And I also feel like since I came to China, so much has changed in my life. I have been here 7 years, but I started as a teacher. I lived in Hunan, and then I lived in Guangzhou, lived in Beijing. I've switched and had so many, different jobs as well. And I think that it's been a lot of personal growth as well, that I don't feel like I've been stagnant during my time here. I feel like I've had a lot of chances to try lots of things, do different jobs, grow myself professionally as well as, in all these other different ways. So I still feel like there's room for growth. And even now, like getting involved with Unite China, but we've met so many people in the entrepreneur scene, and seeing how they work. And I was like, that's always been an interesting thing for me as well. So I don't know. I'll still see how it goes while I'm still curious and interested being here.
Your travel vlog would be able to be moved, but Date Night China couldn't be Date Night China unless you were here. So it sounds like you have
Yeah.
ingratiated yourself in the community in that regard. I mean, you're speaking of these opportunities. What else do you see? I am curious, and I'm sure a lot of people would be interested. It's like, first of all, why are you still in China? What are you doing in China other than teaching English? And like, what are some of the opportunities that you see over there that aren't available back home, wherever home is?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the intersection of a few different things because it is like these opportunities, especially for myself working in media, having the opportunity like, with CGTN now I host travel shows or travel documentaries. I would not be doing that back home. I didn't study to be a broadcaster or a host. I would never have pictured that. I studied media and marketing though, so I always loved being on the other side of it. But I think it's kind of pushed me and given me a lot more chances to try different things that I don't think I would have gotten into that position to do. And maybe it's just been the combination of like liking China, liking travel and China's culture, and then having an interest in media, it's kind of just intersected to allow me to try different things. I've also just met so many interesting people. I don't know about where are you from?
I'm from Canada, Winnipeg, Canada.
Oh, Canada. Okay. Hey. I'm from Texas. So
Okay.
sorry, the typical Canadian joke. You're probably so sick of hearing that.
I hear it all the time. A? What are you
Yeah,
talking about? A?
A. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think for me, like even coming to China was a big eye-opening experience, and the chance to interact with people from all over the world. And Beijing is such a big international city. And I know in the States we do have that. You know, we've got New York City, Chicago. We do have big cities. Um, but I think sometimes, like we were mentioning, leaving my country, I kind of felt like I've seen a lot of the U.S. I've spent, 22 years of my life there. From that point, I was like, well, I'm ready to see something different and do something different, be around different people with different ideas. I also grew up in a very, small town Texas, very conservative Southern bubble. I went to a Christian university in the States. Like there were so many things that I was just ready for self growth and development and different place. And I think China has just allowed me that. Now you could say you could get that lots of places, of course. There's
I
lots
don't
of
know. Could you? That's a very good question.
that is a good question. I guess that's the thing I tell myself. There's probably lots of international cities, but I do feel like it's just, yeah, the intersection of having that with opportunities, with the media, with projects here. There's challenges too, of course. There are those days that you're like, living in China is hard. Why am I here?
And I think that could happen anywhere because China's not my first country that I lived in. I've lived in a few. So sadly, over the last 10, 15 years, I've literally lived in a bubble of never really knowing what people are saying. And it's been very liberating in some ways because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what you're saying, talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about in your language. I thought I was saying the right thing. Apparently, I'm not. And, you know, sometimes there's a Chinese saying, there is no problem if money can solve it. I was like, you know
Yeah,
what? And
that is
sometimes that's
so
it.
true. That is so true, though. Yeah, there is a little bit of a relief sometimes that you're like, well, I can just like tune out for a second. I had friends, who moved and left China this year, and one friend was like, "Oh, I can understand everybody here. It's so annoying."
Yeah,
And I
like
feel
on
like
the
that's that
bus.
funny reverse culture shock. Yeah,
Yeah, and they
it's like this
have
woman on
this
the plane was so loud.
and 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 you learn to tune it out like here in China because people are
Yeah,
loud on their phones and everything. But you sort of if you don't understand what they're saying, you're not dialed in as much. Whereas
yeah,
if you understand, then you kind of it's like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, is that what happened?
yeah,
Oh, that's an
yeah.
interesting book. Let me Google that, and then there goes your
Yes,
afternoon, right?
yes.
I wonder if it happens in Chinese though. If a lot of Chinese people experience that same sort of experience, whereas like all of a sudden they come back to China after living in United States for so long, and they're like, "Ah, I can understand everybody. This is
Yes.
so distorting, disturbing
Like,
all of a
what is
sudden."
going on? Like, yeah, yeah. I've also seen some funny things where Chinese people can understand foreigners. I don't know. There's like been funny TikToks or Douyin videos where like the Chinese like who speak English, they're like, there's a table of foreigners nearby and they don't think we can understand them. And it was like if they were talking about dating like graphically, and they were like, "Ooh, I wish I didn't speak English now." Like, it's really funny.
Uh, yeah, and that's my goal with Chinese is to be able to dial in like that, sort of have those be able. Oh, is that what
That's
they're
the
talking about?
goal.
But I don't know how much do I need to listen to that stuff. Plus, a lot of Chinese people are on their cell phones. You have to be dialed into the WeChat group. It's not the
Yeah.
talking that's happening at the
No,
pub or
everybody's
anything
on
like
their
that.
phones anyways. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Do you think you could be doing what you're doing in China anywhere else in the world? Like if you went back to the States, would you have the same opportunities, especially given that you've set yourself up here in China? And I mean, the skills are transferable. Maybe date night China isn't as transferable, but it could be in some ways. Would you like would you be going back to your hometown or would it be somewhere else in the States? What do you think?
So as far as the future, like this is something Nathan, my partner, and I talk a lot about, and he's from England. So we've talked about where would we go next? What would be the next steps? And I mean, it's still early days, still don't know. we've honestly talked about going to another country, whether that be somewhere else in Asia, whether that be Europe or even the UK. But at this moment, I don't really see us going back to the United States. And for me, that's kind of been okay. Like even since I moved to China my first 2 years, I thought I'd love the experience of living in another country again after China. Like
Yeah.
for me, that's just a really exciting thing to have the opportunity to live in another country, do something different. Like I miss my family. I'd love to go back to the States more frequently for trips home, and to see them and see family and friends. But I'm also okay not living there. Um, and like you said, the skills that I have with media and what I like to do is transferable. So I've kind of like had faraway thoughts about what would I want to do next. And it would be stuff very similar to Date Night China, honestly. Like what we do with Date Night China is really fun. I love kind of taking on the producer side of things, getting to book guests or interview, tell stories, whether that's like through written articles or podcasting or video. Like I would still love to do that, whether it's for my own brand or whether it's working with a company. So I do still think about those kind of things sometimes. We've joked about Date Night China, like what if it became like Date Night Bangkok or Date Night Germany? But like it wouldn't
Oh,
it
good
wouldn't
luck
be the
with
same.
Bangkok. That would be a very
Yeah, I
different
know.
story.
We did have somebody reach out to us from Bangkok and they were like, I just moved here from China. If you ever want to do a spin-off, let me know because I think that would be so interesting. But it also like the time and energy to like regrow it in a different way. I don't think it would be the same. Like we've
Mhm.
talked about what would happen if we left China, what would we do with Date Night China? Um, I mean, who knows still what would happen, but I think for us that would be a good time to either start a new project, leave that as it was because it is its own, niche. I wouldn't want to really pick it up and relocate it.
Yeah. The With your travel vlogging, would you ever go back to that instead and focus more on the travel? Like if you were to uproot with your partner to another place, or like maybe leave the date night stuff and then go back to traveling as a couple. Because I've seen several. It was years ago that there was families like they started out as a young couple that were traveling backpacking, then they became a young family, and it was like they talked about like having babies in South America while backpacking. Just like, wow, a lot of people do. Wow, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really cool to hear about. I have thought about that. Um, I probably would maybe focus on my channels a bit more. Uh, I guess that's another thing though, is I've branded my stuff so much to China, like and Rachel meets China, Date Night China. So I thought even for my personal stuff, do I change my name? Do I need a whole strategy for like switching out of that? Would it confuse people? But I don't want to have that in my name if I would leave. So I've really thought about all of that stuff as well. But I think it'd be really cool to continue exploring because even when I was back in the States, I always,
You got cut off at your rebranding would be a big issue if you were
yes,
to uproot from China.
yes. Oh, that's a big question. Yes. Um, yeah. So I guess, yeah, that would be the big question is trying to figure out rebranding, how I'd want to do that. Because I definitely would want to be doing that in the next phase, wherever that was. Because that's what I've always been doing. I think I was saying, like, even when I was younger, I had a blog in the States. And Instagram and all social media channels weren't as big back then, but I was still like wanting to write. I wanted to take photos. So that's always been something I've loved doing. So no matter where I go, I think I'll be doing that. But I'm not sure if it'll be a matter of stuff I currently have or if it'll be new things that I want to have. I think it's always so interesting. Like, I feel with Instagram, I'm not on TikTok, and I feel like now to still be in that social media sphere, I feel like I've missed the boat a little bit. I don't really have an interest in doing that, and it makes you just like wonder what is the future going to look like. I still enjoy blogging. I like Instagram, and now I'm feeling a bit old. Like, oh, am I? Do I need to keep up with all these new social media apps because that's what everybody else is doing to grow more? Instagram's so hard to grow organically now the same way that a lot of these other social media platforms are. So like I guess I'm still thinking about those things as well. I don't know.
Yeah, well, first of all, the future is NFTs and the metaverse. So if you haven't started your own NFT project yet, like WTF.
Oh, I
Uh,
keep hearing that too. I think I missed the boat on that already as well.
well, apparently it's 10 years from like over the going forward. That's going to be the thing because the NFT thing would be like if you sold your podcast file as an NFT, that would be what it is. It's a digital asset. I yeah,
Right.
I don't
Somebody
I
can
don't
just own that NFT.
I see the idea. I just don't think much of what is out there right now is worth it. It's not there.
Yeah.
I follow this guy Gary Vaynerchuk. He's from the United States. He's in New York, and he talks about and he's banging on about NFTs. He was
Oh,
banging on
he's a
about
big media guy, isn't he?
that's him. Yeah,
He was
he was
always
big
ahead of the
on TikTok.
trend.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And he was big on TikTok. And he's been sort of not talking about TikTok as much because like TikTok got slammed by the United States. Like it just basically was shut down. India doesn't allow it anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
So it got kind of hit with that. But his has been LinkedIn and NFTs. And I respect his opinion because I'm like, I understand the idea of like digital assets and digital contracts going forward. It's a good idea. It's just how do I create them that something's
Right.
worthwhile that would be worth something for people to pay for and they want to hold on to sort of thing or like that as a creator I see the
Right.
idea but as a collector I'd be like I don't need digital stuff that's on a hard drive that I can lose. I just don't want it.
Yeah, I think that I'm just I don't know how the application would actually work for most people in their daily life and the incentive of yeah, like I get the concept, but also I don't.
It's he has some good videos on it. It's I guess it's an interesting technology. His there was two things that he came up with. One was first of all, it's like a housing deed or housing title. Basically, like so you have the faith that your housing title is going to be stored in some safety vault or something, right? And you trust that it's always going to be there. But with NFTs or crypto, blockchain, blah blah blah, that becomes digital in the cloud. So you no longer have a fear of losing that your house title or house deed.
Mm.
The other example he came up with was plane tickets. And this actually made me laugh because I'm like, it actually makes I could almost see it happen. He talks about how in the future your plane ticket will be an NFT because the airline will commission an artist to create the ticket, and that ticket for your journey will be a unique art piece, a piece of art that you could
Mm.
then sell for profit, and then of course the 10% royalty goes to the artist. And I was thinking, going, that seems kind of dumb, but I'm like, wait a minute, no, 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 no. How many people would buy an airplane ticket from like an old collectible from New York to Beijing, 1976? I mean, how much would you pay
Mm.
for that ticket? Just why not?
Mm.
Maybe that it was a person
Yeah.
on the on was it Nixon who came here or even when Henry
Yeah.
Kissinger visited,
Yeah.
right? Things like that, like
Yeah.
having someone from that flight or around that time who was in Beijing, would you buy that ticket as a collectible, frame it, put it on your wall? I'm going,
Mm.
it's actually not such a dumb idea. It almost makes sense.
Okay. Okay. I guess I could see how that would be a thing. Yeah. I
And
guess
it's
it's still I still see it as like you have to have a lot of money though, right? To be for that to be accessible as an option to you, right?
I'm assuming that the NFTs will become a lot more affordable because I don't think they're going to be the exorbitant amounts that people were paying, and I think it's going to be like music and MP3 files where just like the amount that you were making became so little, it was just like everyone can
Yeah.
make music sort of thing. I wonder if
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen with NFTs, but it's something. If you became a
Uh,
big name, then you could
yeah.
command a lot for your artwork or your digital
Yeah.
creations and things like that.
Okay. So my next step is I need to get invested in NFTs and learn more about them. That's
Yeah,
my new goal.
you have to learn how to make them and sell them. That's what it is. Well, I mean,
Okay.
date night podcasts. I mean, you could sell each one as an NFT.
That's
Apparently,
that's
uh,
the new thing. Okay. I'm gonna get on that. I have a new
uh,
goal.
you mentioned opportunities in China. Would you recommend someone to come to China nowadays? What do you
Um,
think?
I get questions from people on Instagram actually who are like, I really want to come back into China. It's been difficult. Or like they left and then couldn't get back in, but they really want to come back in. Or new people who are like, I'm moving to China. I'm moving to China with my family. I get these messages still quite a bit. I'm sure
Really?
it's not as much as it was before, but there are still people who are interested in coming to China, which really surprised me. I kind of wondered if all this expat and China thing was going to be like really minimal and kind of yeah, disappearing for a while. But actually, there are people still interested in coming to China. And so I think it really depends on the industry you're in. Like I think most of my friends who are teachers, like a lot of them who have stayed and are still here now are like, if if things continue this way for another year, I'm leaving. Like a big part of me was coming to China to teach over other countries was the opportunity to travel, like these benefits of having freedom and seeing the country and new culture. And if I can't even leave my city or I might be in my apartment, that's it kind of takes away some of those advantages of why I wanted to come to China to teach. But it depends if you're in other industries and or if you're still a teacher and you're willing um to chance that. Like, and who knows, maybe things will get better. Quarantine has gone down a bit. But I think other people in other industries have mentioned that they still want to come to China. And so I guess I would just say carefully do your research and
What industry do you see as being a good one for people if they were interested in coming to China? What would you tell them? English teaching English is still a viable option. I've been recommending AI and robotics, but that's because I see a lot of
yeah.
that happening in China.
Yeah, that's true. AI. I think in the media and tech or media and education intersect, I see so many live streaming, TikTok, teaching AI platforms that really want to hire foreigners. So if you have like media presence and you also are interested in teaching, or some of them are just for other kinds of projects, not even teaching English for kids, but other kind of things. I think that is pretty big right now. Um, but some people aren't interested in doing that specifically.
It
So I
takes a
guess that's
skill.
something I see a lot
It does
more.
take a
It
skill,
really, and
doesn't
it's
it?
exhausting. A lot of them want you to like live stream and sell like a necklace for like 3 hours nonstop on a live stream. And sometimes you think, oh, I could just like sit there and talk, but it's 3 hours nonstop of doing that. So, ooh, I would really think about that before doing it. But the money seems okay.
Well, if they took care of the internet connection and I didn't have to deal with the editing, I might be willing to do that. I mean, three
There you
hours of
go.
it.
Maybe this is the new path for you.
I don't, I have been offered once to do it in Chinese. I was asked if I could do because I was they wanted a foreign face but speaking Chinese, and I was like,
Really?
but then then he's like, well, we'll have an
Were you
interview
spelling?
tomorrow, and I was like spoken interview. He's like, yes. I'm like, oh, no. And this was last year when I still wasn't very comfortable with my Chinese speaking. Now it's a little bit different, but yeah, I can see it. There are a couple foreigners who are on Douyin and they make pretty good videos, but their Chinese is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's
Oh my gosh. Yes. If you're a foreigner whose Chinese is really good, I've got friends who've got like brand deals. They can get so much money for appearances and for collaborations. Like if you can speak Chinese, oh my gosh, so many doors are open for you here.
does that make you want to improve your Chinese, or you're like good with the English?
It should, right? Like last year when I met somebody, I met this girl who was a student at like I don't know, Tsinghua or something, and she was like, "Yeah, I just studied Chinese, and now like I got connected with a partner who runs my channels, and I speak Chinese in them, and she makes bank." And I was like, "For real?" So almost for a second, I was like, "Okay, I need to double down on my Chinese. I need to get like a brand manager to help me out." But it becomes like a
Wow.
whole thing, right? Like you have to have somebody because you have to switch your account over to business model, and you have to get somebody to help you work out your brands and um or I guess you could do it all by yourself. So I thought about that. But to be honest, like I'm almost even burned out sometimes on doing the influencer thing. It can be really exciting and so cool, and there can be really cool opportunities depending on what you're looking for. But even when I was doing, Rachel Weiss China and I did brand collaborations and things, it can be exhausting. You're doing everything for yourself. You have to be on it all the time. You are the one creating that content, and it has to be very consistent. And you have to just be that has to be what you want to do. And I realized like that's not always what I want to do. I really enjoy doing other things. And if I have to solely go all in on this one thing, yeah, I don't think so.
Let alone, I mean, because if you got to learn Chinese, like one of the reasons like I just became complacent is just I'm like it's just every day. It's sucked up my life. I mean, and it's not like
Yeah.
where you can see the progress. It's like I'm literally reading the textbook and going, don't get it, don't get it. Try the practice test, failed. And you're like, what was I doing for the last 3 months? I mean, is nothing happening up there? At
Yes.
least if you're
Why
an
isn't it
influence,
connecting?
yes, yeah, it's failing like Zoom is right now. But with the influencer stuff, at least you have the videos up there. You got the podcast. Like, look at, I mean, even if I was hungover or I hated that
Yes,
day, the video was
yes.
done. It's over. But with
You
the
can see the material, substantial thing that has come from your work. Yeah,
yeah,
I can see
but
that would be a big challenge.
language studies just like, it's so defeating at times. But I don't know.
Yeah, but hats off for doing that, and hats off to everybody else for doing that. That is, I mean, that is the biggest thing. If I had known I would be here this long, I feel like everybody says that, like doubling down at the beginning to say, "But you didn't know. I didn't know." Like, here we
Yeah.
are.
Well, I didn't want to be that foreigner, especially that guy foreigner who that the man who's been in the country for so long and doesn't know the language. I'm like, I refuse to be that. I have to at least try to learn this language. And so now it's just become like almost an addiction. And it's one of the reasons I'm still here is because I'm like, I can't leave without, like, I've gotten so far. I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
stop now. It'd be like,
Yes.
I have to
Right.
actually have a conversation in this language at some point. Uh,
Right. You're like, I've come this far already. That's a really good point as well. Do you feel like guys get more pressure from that point of view of being that the
uh,
expat man coming to China?
it's stereotypical, very stereotypical. I think actually it's sometimes plays to your advantage not to know Chinese because you don't want to know what your girlfriend is saying about you, or the in-laws. Sometimes you don't want to hear that. Because even my girlfriend dealing with the repair people, like they just talk to each other, and I'm like, I understand what you're saying. You know, the white guy can actually figure
Yeah.
out what you're saying. So I mean, I can say the
Yeah.
few words that I need. I see what needs to happen. I mean, she has no idea what that needs to happen in terms of fixing what's going on here. So, but I think one of the funniest quotes I've heard lately from a colleague was that he tried to start studying Chinese. He's like, okay, this time I'm going to do it. That's it. And I see him the next time. I'm like, so how's the Chinese? He's like, yeah, no. Wife looked at me and she's like, you've been in the country for 13 years and you think you're going to learn now? And I'm like,
Oh, and it's your own wife.
yeah,
You're
it's
like,
like,
there's
oh,
no faith. You have no faith.
snap. Well, yeah, she's not supporting you, but I guess I mean, if he spends an hour or 2 hours trying to learn Chinese, he's not taking care of the kid, right? So I mean,
Right. And yeah, and that's an important thing as well. Time and priorities. How do you balance that? Like,
yeah.
gosh.
I've noticed actually. Speaking of being always on with your influencing and your YouTube, and I know we're getting short on time here. You did mention about always being on. That's one thing about your travel videos. You're always smiling. I mean, you can't be faking this. You must love being able to be out there traveling, meeting the people, and making these videos. I mean, how do you do it? What's your motivation? How do you maintain such
Yeah.
a happy personality?
But I mean, I guess part of that is my personality, even when I'm not traveling or even before I came to China. I've always just had a pretty, I don't know, sunny demeanor. I don't know. I really just enjoy the curiosity and the exploring. And when I finally had a chance to do that, it was pretty exciting. Like coming from the States, we don't have high-speed trains. We have bad public transportation. You needed so much to even be able to access traveling, that I think it was just really exciting to have this freedom and the know-how that I could do this all by myself. I love solo traveling. It was kind of my own independent way to do things for myself, see things, and have my own experience and go where I want when I want. And so I think that's a big part of it. Is just like that joy and your own self-reliance and independence. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I miss traveling so much now. I haven't left Beijing in, I don't know, 8 or 9 months. And I
Yeah.
just really miss that. I'm telling Nathan a lot. I'm like, I'm just itching to travel because it is that like that change of pace from your normal day-to-day routine and getting out, doing something different. Like your mind is in different thought patterns as well. You're not thinking, oh, I've got to go here, I've got to do work, I've got to do this. You're kind of thinking, where am I gonna eat next? I've got to find a restaurant, or how am I gonna navigate this mountain? Your mind is just these different thought patterns that I think is really exciting and really healthy as well. It's
Hmm.
really good for my mental health. Um, yeah, so I really miss that. I really, really miss that.
Where are you planning on going? You said end of August or end of the year that you're going to start
End
traveling
of
again.
end of August. Yeah,
Okay.
so that will be for a work trip. And that will be actually I'm not sure yet. So right now the details are not quite clear. That's one of those things like traveling for work as well versus traveling by myself is very, very different. When I travel by myself, like getting to plan my own itinerary, my own destination, timing, research, all of that is really fun. I enjoy doing all of that. Versus when you travel with a company or traveling for a collaboration or a brand, you kind of have way less control. You're kind of within those structures. It's still really fun and it can be really enjoyable, but it's a very, very different experience.
Yeah.
So not sure where I'll go, but we'll see.
I kind of liked it for the first couple of years. We did a lot of traveling, like business trips and stuff, or work trips, but not business. I had no negotiations. I was told what to say. It's a
Yes.
work trip.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And
Where did you work at?
I work for a language consultant company, and
Uh,
so we like
okay.
deal with different language levels and stuff like that. Most primarily English, and but they set up everything. I thought that was just great. All I had to do was just show up and be like, "Hi, what's blah
Yeah.
blah blah? What's your name? How are these? Blah blah blah." We had everything laid
Yeah.
out. It was great. I contrast that to my years of backpacking. I'm like, I want to hire somebody to do the planning for me. I mean, how much would it cost to have someone do it for me? But I
Yeah.
mean, because my backpacking style is like my girlfriend would plan everything before. She would plan a lot of stuff. Me, I was just like, I was gonna head to the train station and buy a ticket. And she's like, you can't
Yeah.
do
You're like,
that.
that's it.
I'm like, well, why not? We just have to get to Beijing. It's the most busy hub. Once you're on the train, you just take the next stop. I mean, right? And she's like,
Figure it
no,
out.
no, can't do that. We need to know what hotel we're staying in, what time we're getting in, and this and that. And I'm just like, oh, that's very different style of traveling.
That's your girlfriend sounds like me. I like to know all of that stuff in advance and have fun planning it. Whereas like it's nice like Nathan, my partner, or other friends I've traveled with are like, I don't want to do any of that.
Yeah.
Very like, we'll just figure it out. So it can be complimentary then. At least the two of you aren't butting heads about who's who's getting to choose what, where you're gonna go.
Well, we do butt heads because I'm like, what do you mean you haven't planned the day? What are we going to do all day? If I'm with someone who seems to have everything planned and there's no plan, I'm like, well, then I'm just going to go
Oh
start
yeah.
drinking it. Like, I'll be at the
Yeah,
bar.
that's the default. Like, you know where to find me.
Well, I also start wandering. Like, I don't know how much of your travels were just wandering. Like, I would just leave the hotel and just start going. I mean, I always made sure I had enough money for like a taxi back to the center, and then,
Yeah,
but leaving the hotel or the hostel, it was just like just go. Or I would talk to the people at the
exploring.
hostel. Yeah, it was never sort of like, oh, we have to be at the museum at 9:30 or anything. If we get to the museum, great. If we don't,
If not,
you know.
great.
We can
Yeah,
do something else instead. So it was a lot more about the process and the adventure, the
yeah,
journey,
just
rather than
enjoying it.
getting to the like the picture perfect Instagram. What's the other one?
Yeah,
Douyin, WeChat moments, sort
Douyin.
of.
Yeah, that's a very pure form of that, though. You're like, I'm just gonna see what I want to see. I feel like I did a lot of that when I traveled, like in Southeast Asia. I was like in Vietnam or Thailand or something, and you're just like, I'm just gonna see what I'm gonna see. I feel like with China, I have gotten more into like, well, I've seen when when shit goes down, or if I miss this bus at this thing at this other time, if I'm trying to get to this remote village, and if I don't do this, then like,
Should have thought that one through a little bit more. Whoops.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
So we talked about people coming to China. What about if, since you meet a lot of Chinese people, international folks, what if they said, "I want to move to the United States"? What would you say?
um, I do actually have people who do that, and actually, one of my friends from China just moved to the States. I mean, she's going to study there, but I do have other friends who want to go and who want to study as well, or are looking for travel and doing stuff. Um, I mean, I guess for me, I feel like that's great. I'm glad you want to have an open experience in a different country. You know, I guess I don't feel a way about them going to China. That's why,
Right.
like, or going to the States. I guess it's like how I hoped people would respond when I told them I was going to China. You know, you get some people who are like, why
Right.
China? Or, oh, like, why would you want to go there? And I'm just glad people were positive or mostly positive to my face for me. Um, so I guess, you know, I guess that's just how I would feel for them, as long as they're no, being aware and their research and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which city would you recommend if, like, if they were sort of a little bit more open? Like, because a lot of people when they're coming to China, they're like, ah, well, Beijing, Shanghai, or like, could it be somewhere else? Like, where would you recommend for someone to go to in the States if they
Mm,
if they weren't settled on which place just yet?
yeah. Ooh, that's a good question. So at my university, I went to school in Arkansas, and there was a big group of Chinese students who would study in Arkansas there, and it was rough because many of them had came from Guangzhou or bigger cities, lots of
Okay.
transportation, and you get out into the middle of nowhere, and you're like, you need a car to drive everywhere. There's not many restaurants or international cuisines. Like my poor Chinese friends who lived in Arkansas were just like, what do we do? So for that kind of perspective, and even from my own perspective, if I did go back to the States, I wouldn't want to live in a really small, remote area. I love Beijing. I love a bigger city. It doesn't need to be as big as Beijing. Not that there's anything like that in the States, but I would pick Denver. I love
Okay.
Denver. I love Colorado. It's a great, like, kind of urban city, and you're also close to the mountains. So that's one of my top picks. Um, Nashville is actually pretty cool.
Okay.
It's also urban. It's got some public transportation. You're kind of close to the East Coast stuff. Um, yeah, or Charlotte. My sister lives in Charlotte, and that actually has
Charlotte.
a nice, like, Charlotte,
Wow.
North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, because that
It,
also has a more urban. I wouldn't have thought about that before, but my sister loves it. It's very urban, and you're also close to the beach and the mountains. So I guess it really depends. What are you looking to do? What do you want to be around?
yeah. Well, I've
But
heard
for me,
Austin. Austin, Texas was sort of like the
Austin.
name that is being dropped all over the place these days. Not
That's
Los
true.
Angeles and not New York.
Yes, no, and everybody's moving from California to Texas and Austin now.
Yeah.
Austin is really cool. Austin is cool.
I've never been farther south. Is Green Bay farther south than Chicago, or what's further south? We used
Green.
to do road trips, and we went south into Chicago, Green Bay. We did it all in one trip. I can't remember which is where, but like I went to Orlando, but we flew there. I've
Wow.
never done any car travels around the
Oh,
southern parts of the states. I want to go
wow.
there, but I'll tell you, of all the news and everything, and of what I hear about the southern United States, I'm like, would I be taking my Chinese girlfriend on that road trip? Would it be proper? Would it be safe? Would it be okay? That
Would
would
it
be
be?
my big
Yeah.
question.
Would it be a stressful trip or an enjoyable one? Yeah,
Yeah,
I can
but I would love to.
understand
I would
that
love to
worry.
drive that whole length, like from Los Angeles right across to Florida. I just see it because
Yeah,
I think that part of the states is
yeah.
just so charismatic in its own way.
Yes, it is. It is. I've always wanted to do that as well. Like, I've driven from Texas to Florida. To be honest, it's not a not a whole lot to see. I would love to do it the other way and go like Texas to California, Grand Canyon, national parks. There's desert as well. It is. I do miss the United States for the landscapes. There's a lot of beautiful places. National parks are amazing there.
Right. Yeah. The
Yeah.
we used to do those car trips, and we were like parents and I would just go down there, me and my brother, whatever, and yeah, it was great seeing these like Mount Rushmore. I thought was very cool. I know people have some issues with it now, but I'm
Wow. I've
like,
never been.
yeah, that and the is it the Black Hills, the Rolling Hills, Black Hills, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure if we went to the Grand Canyon. I don't think so, but yeah, it
Wow.
was one of those things where it's like
That's very cool though.
people talk about this. It's kind of neat. Look at that.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool. You're like, oh, I'm seeing it with my own eyes, not just
Yeah.
a picture in a book. That's still a really cool experience, especially when you're a kid. It's cool.
Well, yeah, when we were I was late 20s, late teens already, early 20s,
Ah,
but
so
still good enough.
cool.
I mean, because those are good trips. Like when I see families here,
Yeah.
with the kids and everything getting into a car and going, I'm like, you enjoy that. Kids
That's a
behave.
good one.
I mean, just
Yes,
you're gonna
exactly.
enjoy this. You're gonna
Behave.
look back at this road trip and you're gonna be like, those were good times.
Fun memories. Yeah, 100%. Oh, I miss road trips. Yeah, I do miss road trips.
Do you drive in China?
Do you?
I thought about getting the driver's license because I was like, if since I'm still here and since I'm learning Chinese, I should, get a car.
This is the next thing.
It should because then you're not beholden to the trains, the planes, and all that stuff, and the security of all that
Yeah.
stuff. That's what I didn't want. But I've seen so many horror stories of cars getting squished by semis. I'm like, maybe the high speed
Ooh.
train is just, or we'll take the P W, like the green trains. We'll take that. And
Yes. Yes. That'll be enough excitement.
yeah, oh, it'll be a full sensory experience on those trains for sure.
Everything. Yes, 100%. I guess it'd be cool though if you could get a car. Like, I had a friend who went to Shanghai like last week and driving around the lake in Western China.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
looks amazing. Looks amazing.
So you
Would
could
love to do that.
you could do the long distance by public transport and then rent a car wherever you need to go. I
Yeah.
act- I was actually
Yeah.
trying to convince my girlfriend, like, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we drove from Beijing down to Guangzhou? I mean, it'd be kind of neat because
Wow.
they it's not talked about a lot. I know people do it. Like there is an inter Chinese travel car like route, because kind of like the states has routes that you would follow if you want to have car routes, like this car journey, that car journey, and hiking stuff like that. China
Yeah.
has it too, but I'm not sure if it's as accessible in English as it is in Chinese. You'd have to know where to go and who to talk to,
Uh,
sort of thing.
what to
But
do exactly. That's cool though. That would be a really interesting experience.
yeah,
Yeah,
you'd
because
also
I've done a high speed train from like Guangzhou to Beijing, eight
yeah,
hours one day. It's pretty cool, but
yeah.
driving would be nice.
It would be a very different experience. You want to make sure you have insurance as well. I know those. I don't. Do you watch CCTV 13 at all? I call it
No.
was it the horror channel? And it's just accident after accident after accident. I'm just like, this does not encourage me to go driving in China at all.
Yeah. Now you're
That
afraid. God.
navigating Beijing streets is bad enough. Forget
That's
driving.
what freaks
Ugh.
me out. That's what freaks me out, man. And I'm kind of a cautious driver. I don't think I'd do well here. Like I'd be too cautious and I would cause the accident. Like that
Oh,
would be the problem. Yeah.
uh,
So
you might get
I
away with
would
it
need
though,
to,
because you're a foreigner. They'd be like, it's just a foreigner. They don't know the rules.
they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. The very scary reality actually of driving in China. I don't know when you got your license in the States, probably 16, 15. Maybe you're
I was a bit older actually, 18. I
okay,
was
okay,
slow,
by
late
three
to the
years.
game. Yeah.
Um, but contrast that with most Chinese people, they all just started driving within the last 10 years. I mean, I've been driving since I was 15, 15 and a half. And I like my cousins who grew up on the farm earlier than that.
Wow.
That thought of like a lot of these people have not been driving a lot kind of explains a lot why the traffic is so crazy sometimes. But then
Yes.
again,
Yes.
I haven't been driving in Beijing. I've never driven in a city like Beijing. So who's the rookie, right?
Yeah. Me or them or both, just both. So that's so true. I didn't think about that. We do start driving usually much earlier in the States or in the West.
Yeah. All right.
Wow.
Well, we are running short of time here, but so you are all over the place. Now, where can people find you if they want to see what you're up to and what you have to say?
Yeah, if you are looking for Rachel Meets China, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and YouTube, not as active there. Definitely recommend Instagram. If you're kind of looking at daily life and China stuff and travel, that's definitely where I do all of that. But you can also find Date Night China on the same platforms, Instagram, Twitter. Podcast is found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. And we also have a WeChat account if you're on WeChat, so you can follow and see more of our articles and updates there.
Wow. Do you have a personal website as well, or is it the Date Night China website?
So I like for myself, I do have a personal website, rachelmeetschina.com. Date Night China has a website, but it's a work in progress right now. It is active, but it is a work in progress. So
It's
coming
functional.
soon.
It's
It's
functional. It
functional.
works.
Yeah.
Yes, and I encourage people to actually have a listen to some of your podcasts. They are it's eye opening actually to hear these voices, expat and Chinese voices talking about dating, which is a topic that's not talked about very much here in China at all. It's like one of those hush hush things that boys and girls whisper about, sort of thing. So it's great that
Yes.
you're doing something that's usable, that's practical for people.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been really nice talking.